last week we Jesse was at the MIT event, and we did a stream where he was going around on his phone and doing kind of a live tour of the event, and I thought it was pretty good. We have it on the YouTube channel, and I don't know, Jesse, if you wanted to report on any follow up from that.
Yes, it was. There was some mentioning of Frontier Tower, but Morgan wasn't there. We missed Morgan. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything we talked about earlier, but here we go. Yeah. Yeah, I'll go through stuff. So I think this is sharing now. Does that look normal-ish?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a particular um email that I sent out to data and directing folks, but I'm just gonna focus on the first part really, which is all this stuff. Um, I don't know if I can do LinkedIn on this very well, but essentially, here's some nice pictures. When I'm breaking it, it's so funny because I've written so much stuff since I made this email, and it's like, oh yeah, and it's like I'm like, and this is where I go into this part. But essentially, um, to recap the event as a whole, it was really good and really impressive in a way that I didn't expect. Um, you can see my super brief discussion here. For those who don't know anything about the Aug Lab, I didn't know about it. I didn't even get what it really was. But really, what the Aug Lab is essentially um, a 2 to 3 month summer program. And you kind of live in a hacker house and you make stuff. And what the Aug Lab Summit was is this. It was like their finale. Like they show off, they do their demo day. That's what it really is. And I didn't quite understand all of that when I first um, figured things out. I've done a few things with them or not, but I didn't fully go into the event knowing that that was the setup. And it made quite a bit of sense. If you can, yeah, here's the agenda, just to go through that quickly. Opening stuff. Echo Lapto, who I've done a bit with recently. Augmentation Lab, I've been doing some things with them and gone to a few other events. Pulse, I'm least familiar with, but these are sort of the main folks about it. The first session was essentially someone from the Media Lab itself going through what the Media Lab is and how you can apply, which is cool. And then some iconic professor, Hiroshi Ishii. A lot of cool stuff. He kind of just laid a big time overview, mentioned his heroes and gurus. I don't have any great pictures of that I can easily show you, but there were some photos from it. And it was interesting to see his take on things across time. Like there was like old school information theory, cybernetics people, um, not like Norbert Wiener per se, but like people from this era of going 40s, 50s, 60s up through. So it was a nice historical take. I think it was really cool, and it's not like the most. It's it's not. I'm sure a lot of folks would do it if they could, but the fact that both Ishii and Wolfram were there. Wolfram was sort of the finale person, but there was a really nice element of older generations contextualizing things, and I don't know how intentional that was or not. I'm sure it was somewhat intentional, but for a lot of it's not. It's one thing when you have nice big names and people you can easily draw on that want to do this stuff, and that's sort of one of the major perks of being housed in Boston, you know. But I in an ultimate Jesse version of the conference, I would have even teased it a bit more, or like tried to have a session for like Wolfram and Ishii and maybe a few other like really senior folks explicitly mention context and the development and how the moment that we're in is different than the moment that they've the moments that they've been in before. Because I think people, I continue. This is a side Jesse sidebar comment. I continue to realize how much um, one of the things I'm writing about in the summary piece, which is not just a summary piece, but a collection of many of my thoughts, is literally narrativity, is literally the pressures of the current moment on narrativity. There's a commentary on um, alienation and the lack of coherent stuff. Very much present shock, very much future shock into present shock, into all this stuff. And I think cross generational perspectives, at the very least, give this sort of core message that you too, like things matter, and you will be at a different developmental stage, and you will be able to speak to the folks that are now in your shoes. And like sometimes it doesn't seem that obvious until someone says it directly to you that you are part of the continuity in spite of a lot of pressures in the world, a lot of pressures in the world right now against it. So I think on that level, it's very fascinating to see a lot of what was taking place here. But back to literally the regular schedule of the program. The next section, which I didn't really get to see because I kind of got this call like, "Hey, go out and set up exhibitor stuff." So I didn't really see much of these. I did see the first one though with Doga, but these are basically the longevity suite of stuff. Basically, why you should do it, care about longevity. Here's, um, you know, uh, a method that's going to be promising, and then Ellen's sort of a celebrity influencer person who's like, how do we popularize this? Um, and then kind of simultaneously ish was this exhibit space. There was the there was the hall of exhibitors, which is where my excellent in quotes live stream video took place. It was not the highest quality, but it was a nice behind the scenes look. And then at the same time, which is a little tough, but I mean, it makes sense. With interesting startups, I knew some of them. Silvam AI is the one with Dan Van Zyte um, that I mentioned, sort of being state of the art AI related, and some of the cool stuff there too. These are
A lot of
external
those,
folks.
yeah, a lot of those are at Frontier Tower.
I'm sorry.
A
Oh
lot
yeah.
of these are at Frontier Tower.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So Muse Bio works on our floor. I mean, because it's biotech.
Nice.
Turnus is on the 11th floor, and
Ooh.
R3 is not directly working with us, but actually, I've got to credit R3 for donating so much stuff to Biopunk. So thank you, R3.
That's cool.
And yeah, and I might know some more of these too, but this also reflects the fact that Pedro and Vic, who were organizing this, yeah, obviously highlighted some people from the tower. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a mention of front, like maybe they talked about it more here because I was like at this time I was completely not in the room for like this stuff. So maybe the intro mentioned them specifically. I wouldn't know. Um, but there was a mention of Frontier Tower during the intro. Dunya was talking here, Addy was talking here, and the other gentleman was here. And there was a little mention of Frontier Tower somewhere there. Yeah. So that was this lunch, this time and somewhere around here is when actually the video that I took was made. Lunch, then keynotes, human machine symbiosis and these two folks from the Media Lab. You may recall Natalia is I don't think I listed here. Yeah, she's behind the Your Brain on GPT paper that's going around everywhere. And it's very interesting because she basically changed her presentation like the day before it happened, and she did a lot of. I don't have any good pictures to show, unfortunately, but her presentation was essentially about body full, bodiless, and sort of a very she basically most of her presentation was essentially an axis on screen, a four quadrant axis, and it was like here's like really embodied, here's not embodied, here's like really invested in artificial intelligence, here's like less invested, and all these different versions of these dichotomies represented by popular films and like contemporary sci-fi. She does a lot with, but basically she does a lot of this sort of. I've been to some of her events, like at a local like museum, a local expo, where she's like, "Here's let's look at like these sci-fi technologies and everything else." And so there's this like very try to map certain thought spaces and things like that. And she basically made her presentation a tour of all those different spaces with some axes. So I wonder if that's something that she's working on specifically. Not repurposing the video per se. She's already done that in some of her work, but like I'm curious if it's what she'll do next. And then Pat um, is I put anything here for him? Pat, for those who don't know, he's now a professor at the Media Lab. He's got his own working group now, and it's the I think it's called cyborg psychology proper. But he was with Patty Mays at Fluid Interfaces. He co-directs the Advancing Humans with AI, AHA. It's the AHA program, which I'm a fan of. Yeah, I really enjoyed his talk, um, and I'm going to feature it a lot of my write-up. I don't even put all the slides here, but um, that's his logo. There was a very good his there was it was a really 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 rich talk, um, and I think in terms of conveying it to everything else that I want to do and am doing, it was my favorite talk, because, and I don't have the pictures in this particular, you know, Twitter post. Um, he went into things like new technology, old pedagogy, and he has that sort of classic image of the students sitting in a class, like kind of like almost like comic, or I won't say woodshop, wood carving, but like that very old school illustration of students in a classroom at a desk strapped to like some machine that is like electrically connected to a teacher professor like grinding books down, and that image, but then it overlays it with like this is AI and this is an LM and this is and it's sort of like getting really at some of the systemic stuff, like a lot of this. I wouldn't say the focus is on changing systems per se, but very much this augmentation, meaningful augmentation as flourishing, and flourishing as being what he's trying to center in his working group. So technology supports human flourishing, and then he went into these different components during his talk about wisdom, wonder, and well-being. Um, he mentioned future view. He mentioned a number of projects that have happened, and I'm very excited. Honestly, I might even I've been trying to think about what to do because I do want to do more education, and I might even just apply to his program, um, because I like it. Um, Although a little bit later, I might talk a bit about some of my um, future directions in that. So yeah, where are we? This is great. I really think just being able to pull these two keynotes from the Media Lab. Granted, like these are like Dunya's in in the fluid interfaces group, and so and many other people in the Augmentation Lab have ties here. Yeah. But to go from this panel, from these keynote section to this panel, um, was huge. My real favorite parts of the whole series were the panels, um, just because of this was the talks were cool, but they were kind of um, you didn't get to dialogue about it. They were just sort of like it's like condensed lectures, or here's some key points that I want to share. The panels were fantastic and changed what the event was to me. Um, so there's this panel, and then I'll get to one later that was R&D for the future, um, with Prospera, Harry Gandhi, and Sam Rowe from Athos, which is a local I don't know, startup incubator type group. And then Addie from Ecolopto. Originally it was supposed to be Dunya, but Dunya wasn't available for this basically. So Addie kind of stepped in and was sort of a co-moderator and shared his own experiences. And then also moderated for Wolfram later. So good job, Addie. Addie stepped in. Addie's 23 years old, and he's taking a lot on to do this stuff. And he really makes things work, and puts a lot on himself to do it, and I hope to support him ahead in a lot of things. But shout out to Addie for making a lot of stuff happen, including being in support of this event. But yeah, the panel, I could spend a lot of time here in both of these panels, and I'm going to spend a lot of time in my write-up dissecting points made in these two panels. But to stay chronologically aligned at the moment, I don't have any good pictures of this. Here, this is the panel proper. And I think it might be, yeah, I don't know, it's the same image. But no, like this was extremely relevant and interesting because because I like this slightly better right now. Because I guess the title, I don't know if it says any more about it. Yeah, the future work and meaning from an author who's also a lawyer. Ken was a really interesting guy. Juliet Schor, who really got the econ perspective, and Greg Epstein, who's this chaplain at Harvard and MIT. Like he's a religious, I guess, a scholar, but also a chaplain. And it was really interesting. And I didn't know, like my excitement level for the event, if I knew, I mean, I did know I was going to be there, but like, I didn't know they were going to be kind of encouraged to talk about what they did, and both panels even. But even for this one in particular, it was just a very nice mix of, this is why I mentioned earlier, I mentioned narrativity, I mentioned present shock, I mentioned meaning, I mentioned alienation. And so for a bunch of tech folks talking, like these things were on the table. And I regret, like I kind of wanted to get, I didn't have time, or I was in the wrong mindset to think I should just go get a book signed by Ken Liu and talk to him directly afterwards and like do that more. Like I should have done that. I didn't do that. I regret that. But just for there to be essentially a bunch of nerdy tech folks where you have this panel with both the meaning making of it, how does it affect work, what do we do, like the contextualizing that was done here in this panel, and even for the R&D panel, is exactly what future technologists, in my view, need to be thinking about. Because the other side of the coin that wasn't said here, although it was kind of hinted at from a number of folks, like even Natalia kind of commented on this, But there was no explicit commentary that's like, hey, like a Karen Howe commentary, Age of Empires commentary. Nobody really said that outright. Not that they were avoiding it, but like the only thing missing from the contextualization process of this conference to me was Karen Howe, Age of Empires, Empires of AI. Although it is Age of Empires, like that's how I'm actually referring to it myself. That's why I'm saying it. Like we are in an Age of Empires right now. Um, so if you take that aspect, Karen Howe type work, and then this meaning making, and you contextualize it and say like Pat, okay, like meaningful augmentation, like like how do we do that? What is that? What is flourishing like in that sense? Is like hell yeah, like that's like the challenge. Like that is it. Um, and maybe We Robot. If you throw in like a good dash of We Robot, you'd have a really wonderfully complete, like as in like the policy side, the horrific policy landscape that lawyers and good natured and well-meaning people are hopelessly attempting to stem the tide, to be a little grim about it. But and I'm kind of meant saying this because I'm saying this out loud as I'm thinking like, if I could design a conference next year, what would I want it to look like? So it's like a little Princeton Envision, a little We Robot, a little Karen Howe, a lot of Augmentation Lab summit, a lot of this panel, a lot of that panel, a lot of these keynotes. Like that's like what should folks know, and then framing it that completely. What can you do with it? That's where my mind is going for some things. Needless to say, I very much enjoyed the panels, including this one. There are a lot of great quotes. Greg did a wonderful job of like really calling out like, hey, I know you're all talking about, technology, but is this not like messianic and apocalyptic? Like, are you not putting your faith in certain outcomes that let's just get to this end state and then we're gonna be all great or we're gonna be all bad? Like he did a great job of drawing out the religious parallels that I think are unpleasant to look at for people that maybe think they're very rational and have absolutely no bearing to the faults and sins and wrongdoings of the past because they're building a technology. It's like, well, okay, so that was cool. Ken had a lot of really good perspective and contextualization on the human condition, and Juliet brought in some, one of her takeaways was the defense of the 4-day work week or 3-day work week and main pilot program that she's doing with that, but also just at its core, sort of the defense of having time to do stuff, like you could say sovereignty, autonomy, the defense of you as a human being, you can have time to do what you want to do, as opposed to present shock, as opposed to everything. Well, just work more, work more, work more, work more. She kind of gave a little historical perspective of when industrialization happened, like and all these things happen where it's like, okay, well, there's a new technology, but okay, everybody's work more, work more. We can now everybody work more. But then these movements coming in to say, well, maybe we should have, child labor laws. maybe we should have things called weekends. Like there's sort of the productivity goes up, but then maybe isn't accounted for, and the adaptation. And I think that's a fascinating nexus because the rapidity of the changes now versus society catching up to them, that is where we're in. That's the exciting, challenging, crazy time. That's the moment. That's the timeline we're in, and that's something that I'm trying to emphasize for many folks when I talk more and more about this. So yeah, super quick preview. Elise was the moderator. She's doing some things with Sloan. She's a good moderator. She brought out a lot of the different segments well. So kudos to her. Let's see, where are we at here? I'm not going to go through all the residencies because there's a lot of them, and you can look at them on the Augmentation Lab website. But this is when everyone's like, oh, like this is what the residency, what they've been doing for the last while. I attended, this is Ron and G or Parth, and I attended an Ecolopto workshop salon with him a few weeks ago at Harvard. He has interesting ideas about the future. So I'll just shout out that. There's many, many, many interesting things here. And also some past residency projects that were really interesting, like narrative tales or conceptual tales that fit a lot with plot twists of what's going on there. So yeah, we had more exhibitions, book signing. The hypnosis session also was super fascinating. I could say a whole lot about that. I don't think I have any easy pictures from this here. This was actually way cooler and more interesting than I thought, especially when actually combined, which is kind of funny because you can see like the time's a little weird. When actually combined with Andres from QRI, um, if you got these folks together and like spoiler, that's basically what happened the next day. It's not on here, but there was this is what happened the next day. Kurt was originally supposed to be at the Media Lab event proper, or the summit, and he wasn't. So basically, he did a little recording with Andres the next day. And where we're going with this, and this is me being a big time nerd, where we're going with this is if you combined the QRI stuff with the hypnosis stuff, it was so interesting. And also, I mentioned somewhere in here the QRI stuff and the hypnosis stuff really had an interesting job of kind of triangulating or like pinging, like sonar detection inside, pinging around inside the black box to see what's going on. And with the hypnosis was, it was cool to see people, whatever, but there was sort of like, oh, now how would, let's say your Grok or Chat GTP, how would you respond to this? And like, okay, that's funny, but what it did, there's a great, I'm not going to try to find it, but Andres on Twitter later said, oh, like you can clearly like jailbreaking some of the LLM structure of mind stuff. And of course, I think of Elon Barinholtz, who's doing a lot of work on that particular topic regarding languages, LLMs, and stuff like that. But basically, these people get into a suggestive state, and then you can using certain stimulus, and I thought it was very clever and very interesting how Albert, he asked one of the attendees, like, oh, are your friends here? And they're like, yeah, we know him. And he's like, oh, does he drink much? And what he was trying to do was like, does their internal storage know what it's like to have a beer or two beers? And he demonstrated one, seeking the awareness of it, but then also like he basically produced doubling effects of, okay, you've had 1, 2, what about 4, what about 6? And like he was able to connect the internal structure of the person, getting confirmation that, because he didn't want, he was checking to see, he didn't say this, but I deduced he didn't want to give the person commands that they had no exposure to. It's like, well, pretend like you're high on a drug that you've never had before. Like he wanted to avoid that. And I was like, okay, yes, like that makes a lot of sense. So the way that he crafted it was interesting. And the way that between that and what a lot of the QRI talk was about was essentially, yes, drugs, but more like, what are these select stimuli doing, and how do they, the QRI and Andres is very phenomenologically interested. So a lot of like, I got to ask him a little bit about like, okay, like here's the Varelian lineage of trying to bring rigor to this, and I have a lot of respect for like, there's a little bit of overlap between like the interviewing, where was he going with unbecoming aware, where was he going with like the second person stuff, how do we get from first person to second person to third person, the ways to evaluate this and make it more rigorous. And it's like, here's like what the QRI is sort of doing to that sense. So having that combined with Albert, who again, Albert was not presenting himself as a scientist, but he mentioned like threat simulation. He mentioned the going, I forgot not catatonic, but like when you rub the shark's nose and it just limps out and like stops moving. Like all of these different actual like somewhat rigorous um studies of like, okay, well nobody knows. He's like, nobody really knows what this particular state is or how to talk about this, but like here's what we can do in this state. So it was quite a compelling, and not at all a sideshow, but actually quite compelling in the sense of, especially for this crowd, I think it was a really nice, interesting choice. And I know that Addie's done a little bit with Albert before, in like Toronto area or whatever. But it was a very interesting component, in a here's an existing very clear augmentation, within current bounds, within no new technologies. This is just like this kind of like this is what you're working with. Like this is part of the inherent system that can manipulate it in these ways. So it was an interesting combination between these two. Um, I'm not even going to talk about Wolfram because he's a cool guy. We all know him really well. He's a great. And no, I will say a little bit, and I don't know how much time I have, rather like a minute or two.
Oh no, you have as much time as you want.
Okay. Um, do I have a good picture for this? I don't think I have a great picture easily here that I can share. Suffice to say, this panel was also fantastic, and I'm going to detail quite a bit more of it ahead. Let me really quickly look to see if I have. Oh, the LinkedIn. How convenient of me! I forgot. Like, I made this post. Yeah, great. Cool. Pat myself on the back. So here's what the panel looked like. And again, this is going to be Dunya of the Aug Lab here, and Dunya of Fluid Interface and stuff here, but she was unavailable for this. So I'm just going to read my post and then say more about it. There were so many great things about the Aug Lab Summit this week. Particular shout out to the folks on the panel. It was refreshing to see the way everyone spoke about doing research and developing ideas, as many R&D spaces and approaches aren't that interested in actually changing or challenging systems at large. This week, I've had great conversations with our Jopra interns about the different areas innovators will find themselves in and how to speak, understand, and navigate them as we push ideas and projects forward. Both panels, as I already said, I like both of them. This one and the future work meeting, the first one, really hit home on the goal of centering the human condition, building from within the that should be the actual world we're in right now. It's quite welcome at a time, as I kind of said before, where it's often more convenient to be abstracted and disconnected from our current moment, the current moment we inhabit, as fragmented, narratively disputed, present, shocked, digiphrenia laden as it may be. More on this later, which is what I'm going to talk about either write up. So kudos to the organizers, and cheers to folks that are doing all this stuff. So that's my, glowing take on things. But what was really cool about it, I didn't know a whole lot about some of these folks and what they're doing, but Trey Joff is it's not really here, is with Prospera, and I'm not even going to try to explain what's going on, but Prospera is essentially trying to rework some things about economics and laws and innovation, and there's a special economic region in Honduras. And I don't know if Morgan or anybody else wants to say and step in and comment on that, you can. But it was really interesting to see what he and Prospera are attempting to do as like actually changing, well, not changing, but like experimenting. I see it as an experiment, and how do you get people and countries and how do you try to create these different environments? And this is like a very hands-on approach, not just sort of let's make a lab. Like, no, this is like let's make an economic arena where you can do things in a certain way. Then I'm sure they're not without controversy. I'm not saying this is the true way forward, but it's very interesting to get a take from that level. And it's also supremely interesting to see how everybody spoke. Trey is very much, DC speak, and American politicians right now, I think, basically have to speak. There's a very particular cadence about solutions, and here's the problem, and then here's a solution that will bring you success. There's a very particular way of speaking that he embodied, which I found very interesting, and it was totally disharmonious in some ways. No, well, that's not true. Um, there wasn't any disharmony, but to, I guess, would say a trained eye or a trained ear, and someone who is spending a lot of time in writing materials and educating others about talking different arenas, it comes across in like he's got his whole look. You know, he looks like a DC lobbyist type. Someone who's going to get down in there and make some deals and advocate. And it was interesting to hear that compared to like Addie, who's probably very far away from that. And then you have this Sam from Athos, who is Sam and Harry were both sort of these community-oriented, softer-spoken, more aware, more presenting a certain space for things, and what they were doing. And I say this, not presenting Trey as some hard, cold person, not at all. Like everybody was on the same page at sort of the spiritual level of what was happening. But it was just so interesting to see to get the differences in the room. It's very society, ethics, tech spirit of get the different people who are like in very different domains that care about the same stuff in the same room. So I might have presented this a bit awkwardly, but like I think it was fantastic to see that. Like it's great to see get people who don't talk all the same way. Because if you're in a room full of like educators, you're in a room full of idealistic tech startup folks, if you're in a room full of billionaires or wannabe billionaires, like the tone, the conversations are all that can kind of wash away into nothingness, and like, oh yeah, like this is how we all talk this way, and we all see the problems the same way. I find it to be sometimes it's great to do that, but I really appreciate when in an effective way, when in an interesting or let's uh, uh, meaningfully ways of indicating the differences that each of the domain spaces are trying to solve. Uh, when that can be shown usefully and with substance to a viewer who is not to a lay viewer, I think that's a huge that's a very rare thing to do well, and I think it came across really well here. Um, Harry Gandhi's Teal Fellow, which I was like, okay, what's that about? I mean, I know what it is, but like I didn't know what his approach was going to be. And I wish I got to spend more time with him Sunday because there was a lot of folks had this great opportunity to have lunch with Harry, and I kept trying to go to it. My travel plans got delayed, but I really want to catch up with Harry because the way he spoke about things, he was super aware of like community. Um, he had a really nice set of commentaries on like what does it take at a how do you do the future of R&D? How do you make communities different? And it was very much not get to market and get your moat, like your technological moat, your strategic advantages. Like that's obviously that's I think understood for everybody here. But there was this very interesting emphasis of what you need money, you need clout, you need respectability, you need legitimacy, but you need community. You need. There was a very open inquiry to like, what is it that we need to do um, to create the environments that maybe will lead to actual breakthroughs. And there was sort of across the whole panel, there's sort of this open sense of not being beholden to any particular structures, which I found very structures or establishments, but also um, it wasn't willingly blue skies thinking either. It was really nicely grounded in let's do things intentionally with some difference that aren't just willy nilly. Oh, let's magically do whatever. and aren't just the only innovation that matters is the innovation of you delivering profit at a lower cost delivering more profit to yourself by lowering the cost of delivering value to the consumers. Like that is innovation, and that's sort of my intense juxtaposition of like there's parts of the world where like that is the innovation that matters. It's like lower the cost and get more money and deliver the value. And it's like yes, but there's also other things to do in an innovation sense in how we do it. I think it was well modeled here. Addy did a very nice job of stepping in quite last minute. Um, he represented Ecolopto well. Ecolopto is in development on many of what it's aiming to do and who it's supporting and how things are happening. So I think it was a nice perspective of, you're, you can be a young person, you can be striving to do these interdisciplinary spaces. And shout out to my forthcoming talk on, I don't know if I can easily share this here or not. I'm going to do this. I don't think you can. Can you see what I'm sharing? What do you see on your screen right now? Out of curiosity.
The LinkedIn tab.
Okay. I'm going to tease this because this is incomplete, and I don't like the title at all. But basically, so what do you mean by interdisciplinary research? What it's really going to be is like interdisciplinary, undisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Like, what is this? And then, sort of in a Joe sense, where do I think all this stuff should go? Yes, contextualize in that we're in a very unique moment in civilizational history in that context. But to go back to this proper, Eddie's part of why I'm a fan of what Ecolopto is doing is like there's sort of a no holds barred, let's put stuff on the table. There's definitely a sort of a bias and interest in certain like cognitive, biological, hormesis stuff, and that's Addie's personal bias. But they do try to get other things going on too. And then, like I said, Samro was a proper moderator, but he did a good job of sort of feeding around. He did a very good job of setting things up. Like I've kind of impressed by Athos, and I've talked to them before, and I've been in one of their events, and they've been really inviting. Like I could see myself wanting to do something like what Athos is doing long term, or joining them, or something like that. So shout out to Samro for, I don't know, I was very impressed at how much this didn't fit some of the things that I thought would be here. And given this is sort of I don't want to say progressive because it's not really it was legitimately actually R&D for the future and what do we need to do. Like it didn't really feel like many other things felt. I don't think it was like supremely unique or like irreplaceable. But between this, as I said, between this and the first panel, there's definitely an appreciation for like I say somewhere, I think in my full write up, I say the only reason, like, because you could easily do this event right without either panel. Like you could take away both panels and say, hey, here's our residency summit. We have a couple of keynotes from the Media Lab. That's great. Also, there's a wonderful this slide. I'll highlight this slide. Yeah, a cause near and dear to my heart. This is actually at the start with Dunya doing the intro here. But there was a legitimate actual inquiry, like how do we want to do this? Philosophical yearnings. Like it was evident that the construction, particularly of the panels, I would say, was we want to have these voices in here that are going to actually bring ethics and vision and society into the discussion in a way that's not just sort of hand waving or not some, oh yeah, and here's our keynote speaker at the very end of the day that's going to talk about responsible AI, which many events in Boston here do. So it's nice to see things handled much differently and much more like we value this, and we're going to make space for this, and we're going to have this be a real part of the event and not just a little add-on. So that was quite cool. That was pretty much the whole deal. I think I already mentioned this was a really fun this was a fun moment. It was on the fly. It was I one of my probably my biggest claim to influencer and somewhat whatever renegade academic fame is that I hand delivered a coffee, black coffee, no sweetener, to Andres, and I got Kurt a bottle of water from the vending machine when we couldn't find any water anywhere. So and he's like, "Oh, now you sponsored the event. That's great." So I was like, "Yes, I helped sponsor the summit and this amazing Theory of Everything with Kurt Jungle podcast." And yeah, so that was fun. It was a fun day, and we all had lunch afterwards. We went to a local place and sat down. We're big time nerds for another hour or so. It was a good time. It was a very fun weekend.